What if I told you that at 39 years old, I accidentally destroyed my entire life with a single Google search? Actually, let me rephrase that. What if I told you that at 39, I discovered my entire life had been built on a foundation of lies so devastating that, when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just change my world, it obliterated it completely. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how one random background check revealed a family secret so dark it made national headlines and cost my adoptive father everything he'd ever built. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I was 7 years old the first time I realized, deep in my gut, that something was wrong with my family. Something had to be wrong. Every other kid would spring out of their seats the moment the final bell rang, running, laughing, scanning the pickup line for their mothers. But not me. Never me. I stayed glued to my chair, whispering silent prayers that the hours would stretch a little longer, that maybe today the bell would forget to ring and my teacher would magically become my mom. Because going home was no sanctuary. Home was where the monsters lived, monsters who happened to share my last name. By the way, if you're still here, this is the perfect time to give this video a thumbs up and tell me where you're watching from. Trust me, this story is so intense that even I sometimes forget to like videos because I get lost in them. Done. Now let's get back to this gripping story. I was their only child. Logic would dictate that I'd be showered with love and attention, right? Wrong. Birthdays didn't exist for me. I only learned which day was mine when I was old enough to ask other kids why they blew out candles and threw parties on a day I couldn't name. There were no birthday clothes, no shopping days with mom, no family dinners. My wardrobe, charity donations and hand-me-downs. I watched other kids run into warm arms while my dad held a special hatred for me, the kind that left finger-shaped bruises. He hit me for nothing, starved me, locked me in the bathroom, and threatened to give me away if I breathed a word. Home was where I learned to make myself tiny and keep my fear inside. I got my first job at 14. At first, it was about the money. I needed tampons, toiletries, the basics. But honestly, I was just happy to get paid for being anywhere else but home. Stocking shelves felt safer than tiptoeing through that house. Books became my oxygen. I practically lived at the community library, staying until they turned off the lights. The librarians soon became my people. They didn't know my whole story, but they saw me. They saved books for me, helped me find whatever I needed, and even brought me snacks when I looked like I hadn't eaten. While other kids were at soccer practice or sleepovers, I was in the library, soaking up every piece of knowledge I could find. Education wasn't just school for me, it was my escape plan. I'll never forget the day I got my acceptance email from the University of Florida College of Medicine. Full scholarship. I ran home, literally ran, like I'd just won the lottery. But to me, it was bigger than the lottery. It was freedom. Mom, I got in. Full ride, you don't have to pay anything. She didn't even look at me, just reached for the remote and turned her soap opera louder. My dad walked in, glanced at me once, and gave me the coldest stare. It was like I was invisible, like a ghost had just announced life-changing news to an empty room. That moment broke something in me, but it also made one thing crystal clear. I was completely on my own. So I threw myself into med school with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy. While classmates were joining fraternities or dadding, I was in the library at 5 a.m. and still there when security locked up at midnight. 4 years later, I graduated in the top 1% of my class. Did my parents show up to graduation? Take a guess. It doesn't even need to be a wild guess. By 39, I had built something extraordinary. My own hospital, my own medical practice. I was living proof that you could overcome any childhood and build something beautiful from the ashes. Or so I thought. Here's where the story takes a turn that sounds like fiction, but I swear on everything I hold dear that this actually happened. I was hearing staff for my new hospital and doing background checks on potential employees. Someone in my professional network recommended this free background check website, said it was surprisingly thorough for a no-cost service. I'm a cautious person, always have been. So when I stumbled onto this website that claimed it could pull up all kinds of public records, I decided to test it on myself first. You know, just to see what would come up. What I found made my blood run cold. My parents' marriage certificate. Dated August 12, 1987. But here's the thing. I was born in 1984. At first, my brain couldn't process it. I stared at the screen, thinking maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the site had pulled the wrong file, but the more I looked, the more it sank in. Let me do the math for you. They got married 3 years after I was born. Meanwhile, my entire life I'd been told the same story. That my parents were high school sweethearts, that they got married right after graduation, that they had me a year later. The perfect little origin story. Except it wasn't true. My hands were shaking when I picked up the phone to call my mom. Mom, when's your anniversary? Silence, a long pause, long enough that I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. June 15th, honey, you know that. Try again. I don't understand. August 12th, 1987. Ring any bells? The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. And when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. We didn't want you to know you were born out of wedlock. The stigma back then. Click, I hung up. That night I didn't sleep. I ordered DNA kits from every major company. Rush delivery. The next morning, the packages arrived. I lined them up on the table, took a photo, and sent it to her with one message. You have until Friday to tell me the truth. All of it. This is your only chance. For the first time, I wasn't going to give my mom unlimited chances to redeem herself, to be the mom I wanted her to be. Friday came. Her voice was already trembling when she picked up. I got pregnant in high school, she said. His family moved him to Florida when they found out. Your father, the man you know as your father, adopted you when we got married. He loves you, sweetheart. He's always loved you. Love. Love. I felt the dizzy rush, the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision, and I knew it wasn't shock. It was rage. Cold, quiet rage. That's what she called 18 years of psychological warfare. The belt slashing across my back when I dared to talk back. The grip so tight it left purple fingerprints on my arm. The nights I was forced to kneel in a corner for hours over some forgotten chore. The days locked in the bathroom without food or water. The way he'd look straight through me, like I didn't exist. And through it all her. Nodding along, approving, even smiling sometimes while he told me I was worthless. Stupid, a mistake. Love, I repeated into the phone. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Is that what you call what he did to me? She hesitated, then. You were a difficult child, Emma. You needed discipline. Discipline. Like I was some wild animal, instead of a little girl begging for affection. You should have just given me up, I whispered. You ruined my life. Click. The DNA results came back a month later. 3 potential biological fathers, none of them matching the story my mother had told me. She'd lied again. By this point, I'd found an online support group for people who discovered they were adopted as adults. Most of their stories involved loving adoptive families who'd simply wanted to protect them from painful truths. Mine involved a woman who'd essentially sold me to an abuser in exchange for financial security. I decided to share my story on social media. I just wanted to actually talk about what had happened to me. I wanted to pour out my frustrations without having to deal with pity from those who knew me. It was a heart-wrenching period of my life. I made sure to leave no traces of my identity. I really just shared my experience. The betrayal, the anger, the grief for the childhood I'd never had. That's when things got really interesting. A week later, a certified letter arrived. 8 pages of legal threats from my adoptive father's attorney. Cease and desist. Defamation. He had probably seen my posts. He wanted my posts taken down or he'd sue me for everything I had. Here's the kicker. I'd had both my parents blocked on Facebook for 10 years, but somehow they had screenshots of everything. Every post, every comment, every photo I'd ever shared. They'd been stalking me, monitoring my life, even after I'd cut all contact. I hired a lawyer, an absolute shark of a woman who smiled when she read the legal threats. "This is bullshit," she said simply. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. But more importantly, this tells me they're scared. People don't threaten lawsuits over social media posts unless those posts are hitting very close to home." She was right. Within a month of my posts going public, people from my hometown started reaching out. Neighbors who remembered seeing police cars at our house. Teachers who'd noticed bruises but had been told to mind their own business. CPS workers who'd filed reports that had mysteriously disappeared. My story had given others permission to tell theirs. But the real bombshell dropped 6 months later. Mom called from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer. "Emma, I need to tell you something. I'm sick. Cancer, stage 4. I felt nothing, which surprised me. "I'm sorry," she continued, "for everything. I was scared and young and I made terrible choices. But you deserved better. You deserved so much better." Against my better judgment, I started visiting her. Not out of love, I want to be clear about that, but out of curiosity. I needed to understand how someone could watch their child suffer and do absolutely nothing. The conversations we had during her final months were brutal. She told me everything. How my adoptive father had promised to take care of us both, but only if she stayed out of his way when it came to discipline. How she'd convinced herself that his abuse was somehow making me stronger, more resilient. And then came the bombshell that explained everything. She'd been making money online. A lot of money. First with photos, then videos, then live streams. She'd built this whole persona as a sweet, innocent housewife, and men were paying her substantial amounts to maintain that fantasy. Meanwhile, she was letting her husband terrorize her adopted daughter. "I told myself I was doing it for you," she whispered during one of our last visits. "To keep him happy so he wouldn't leave us. But really, I was just scared of being alone." When she died, I was the only person at her funeral besides my adoptive father. He tried to approach me afterward. "Emma, we need to talk about your mother's business. There are accounts, passwords." "No. She left you everything in her will. The house, the accounts, all of it." I stared at this man who'd spent 18 years making me feel worthless. "I don't want any of it." "You don't understand. There's over $2 million. I said no. But I was lying. I did want something from that inheritance. I wanted justice. I took the inheritance, every penny of it. The house, the online accounts, the investments, all of it. And then I did something that would have made my mother roll over in her fresh grave. I donated every single cent to organizations that help abused children. The house went to a transitional housing program for domestic violence survivors. But before I shut down her online accounts, I posted one final video explaining exactly where all that money had come from and where it was going. The video went viral. Millions of views. News outlets picked it up nationwide. Local doctor donates $2 inheritance to abuse prevention after discovering family secrets. My adoptive father's construction company lost every contract within a month. His neighbors stopped talking to him. His drinking buddies found other bars. He tried to sue me again, this time for emotional distress and defaming a dead person. My lawyer was practically giddy. "Let him try. We have hospital records, CPS reports, and about 50 witnesses who have come forward since your story broke. Plus, you literally cannot defame a dead person. It's legally impossible." The lawsuit was thrown out. He declared bankruptcy 6 months later. While his world collapsed, I found something mine had always been missing: my real father. A kind, gentle man in Tampa who had spent 40 years wondering about the daughter he lost. When I called him, he broke down crying. He had a family now, 3 other children, a wife of 35 years, but he told me there had always been a hole in his heart shaped like me. Now, we have dinner once a month, weekly video calls. His wife treats me like I've been there all along. Then last month, my phone rang. A social worker. My adoptive father had collapsed. No emergency contacts. My name was still buried in his old paperwork. I went, not for love, not for obligation, for curiosity. I wanted to see what rock bottom looked like for him. The man who once towered over me now looked small. The machines keeping him alive beeped softly. He looked fragile, almost human. Emma. His voice cracked. Hello, Hank. I used his first name on purpose. He flinched. I'm dying. I know. I'm sorry for everything. I was angry, and I took it out on you. That wasn't right. I stared at him, searching for the monster that had haunted me. But all I saw was a broken old man clinging to his last breath. You're right, I said. It wasn't. Can you forgive me? I thought about it for a long moment. Not for him, but for me. I forgive you, Hank, but I don't absolve you. There's a difference. He died 2 days later. I didn't go to the funeral. Today, I have a life I built entirely on my own terms. A successful medical practice that helps people heal. A biological father who loves me unconditionally. A chosen family of friends who see me for exactly who I am. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that little girl, curled up in a closet, praying for a love that never came. And I wish I could reach her. I wish I could tell her, it wasn't you, it was never you, and one day you'll break free. Because not every story ends with hugs and forgiveness. Some stories end with freedom. And let me tell you, freedom is worth more than every apology in the world. So if this story hit you, if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own family, or if you've started questioning the stories you were told about your past, please know this. You're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Drop a comment below, let me know where you're watching from, and share your story if you're ready. Because the truth might hurt, but lies will eat you alive. Always choose truth, even if it shatters everything you thought you know. Because sometimes, breaking is the only way to finally be free. Thanks for staying with me through this one. I'll see you in the next episode of Chronicles with Nair.